So, time for another one of our books of the year, featuring each one of our top 10 most popular books of the year.
Ill-thumbed edition.
Absolutely.
What a fantastic book this is.
Do you know, it's a funny story, this. Can I just tell you this? Because I was thinking about this yesterday, because I was contacted by Radio 4 Saturday Review back in probably February, and said, would you come in? And what they do is they get you to read a book, see a play, see a film, whatever, go to a gallery, all in a week. And this was the book. And so they got it to me. And of course, by the time I read it, lockdown had happened. They were doing no further recordings. And I read yesterday the very sad news that it's not coming back. So, you know, that's very sad for Saturday.
Oh, that's tragic.
Which was a bit of a staple of the Radio 4 schedule on Saturday evening. So I read it in vain. No, I didn't read it in vain. I read it very much, enjoyed it. I have to say, when I looked at it, I thought, is it possible to do some spin on the Beatles story that hasn't been done before? And
that's precisely what I thought. Exactly. Because there's so many books. So how can you learn anything new? But the big trick is, which is the one he applied to his wonderful book about Princess Margaret called Ma'am Darling, was he's obviously gone through all the biographies of the time, hasn't he? Gone through the index and looked up as to whether or not they mention the subject. So if anybody mentions the Beatles, he goes back and finds this absolutely brilliant, brand new story.
But it has to be quite a good. It has to. You see, I think it's very cleverly put together to give the impression that it hasn't been agonizingly put together, and it must have been. I've thought about this a lot. Every time I dip into it, I think, how do you do this book? Where do you start? You know, and I know your point about, you know, looking in the content, the index of anybody's memoirs, whoever met the Beatles, they wrote about it.
Yeah, because they're bound to remember it.
But of course, the classic case that, you know, the one I read it and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I came to this bit in 1960 where the Beatles were playing at the Top 10 Club, I think, in Hamburg. And who should come to see them but Malcolm Muggeridge? And I thought, that cannot be right. That cannot. And I rang you. I spoke to you. I said, Mark, I'm reading this great brand book. Malcolm Muggeridge, it's got to be bollocks, hasn't it? You said, well, it sounds a bit odd to me. That
I thought we would know by now if it had happened.
Absolutely. And we checked with other people, and it sounds shady to me. And I finally went to really a lot of trouble, because I had to review this for the New Statesman. A lot of trouble to find Malcolm Muggeridge's diaries. And I did. And went through the index, and the Beatles are not in the index. So it's not as simple as going in the index. It's only when you go to the day in Malcolm Muggeridge's 1960 that you find, yes, he did go and see the Beatles at the Top 10 Club. So, you know,
isn't that amazing?
How he did it is just astonishing.
I know. He describes their long hair and their weird feminine faces. It's an amazing description of them, isn't it? He's got no idea who these people are. And there's an incredible exchange when they meet and the things they say to each other. It's fantastic.
It's just, it's such a kind of, I mean, two things, really. One, the story of the Beatles is unique. There is simply nothing else, not just in pop music, but in the whole world of entertainment and 20th century culture. There is nothing which touches as many points as the Beatles touch in their quite short period of time together. I've been thinking about this today. Could you do a book like this about the Rolling Stones? No. Could you do a book like this about Bob Dylan? No. Could you do it about the Beach Boys? No. There's just nobody else at all. You know, their capacity for kind of creating interest absolutely anywhere they went is just, it's unique.
And also everybody wants to meet them. So Muhammad Ali wants to do, or certainly Crowbar is doing a photo opportunity with them.
Well,
then afterwards says, who are those little sissies?
Who are these guys?
He has no idea who they are.
But obviously later on realizes that he was a really good photo call to do, because he got him all over the papers, because they were more famous than you are, Cassius, or whatever he was called at the time. And but it's also such a kind of expanded universe, so far beyond pop music this goes. You know, it goes into politics and culture and royalty and sport, and because absolutely everybody wanted to meet the Beatles or wanted to somehow intersect with the Beatles. And so you just get this extraordinary, you know, the view of the Beatles through this through this new lens, I suppose, is what makes it work. And it's fantastically well done. It's incredibly readable. I can't imagine anybody in your family who wouldn't get something out of this book.
I
Can you?
couldn't
You know what I
agree
mean?
more. And it sees them from so many new angles. There's a bit where they're at Beryl Bainbridge's party. Do you remember that in 1960 in Liverpool? It's a
Oh
three-day,
yes, of
three-night
course.
party, and they're still called the Silver Beats. It's pre-Beatles, really. They're all teenagers, and they play this set, which he describes as a disgusting noise. And McCartney, the 17-year-old McCartney's in the corner and tells everyone how he's writing a song about a French girl called Michelle. It's amazing. And there's a bit where they're on a plane going from Minneapolis to Portland. You remember that? As a private plane, one of the engines catches fire.
Oh,
And you get this description of what all four of the Beatles do, their reactions, which are all so different. And the last one is George, who strolls very casually to the back of the plane and says, Beatles and children first. So just these little kind of little snapshots you get of their lives. Amazing. And the story of Melanie Coe. Isn't that great? I mean, you know that story.
Oh,
but the way Craig tells
yeah.
it is so good. Melanie Coe was the girl who, was the subject of She's Leaving Home. And by complete coincidence, happens to be the girl that McCartney had voted the winner of a twisting competition on Ready Steady Go 3 years before. He tells that story beautifully. It's brilliant. It's a story. It's a big commercial read, isn't it? And it's for people who would know nothing at all about the Beatles. It'd be thoroughly entertaining. Incredible stories. And even if you know a lot about them, like we do, you find out a lot of new and interesting stuff.
Yeah. So shall I read a bit?
Read a bit.
This is chapter 106. And it's a party at the Westbourne Suite, Royal Lancaster Hotel, Bayswater, London, W2, on the 24th of December, 1967. On the 8th of December, 1967, the elaborately neurotic comic actor Kenneth Williams, I love that.
That's good.
Picks up his fountain pen and in his perfect italic script writes an enraged letter to a friend. This is a classic example of how it comes at this story via the people, who intersect with the Beatles. Do you know those Beatles gave a private party recently at the new Royal Lancaster Hotel, and their manager rang and asked if I would go along and compare their cabaret? Have you ever heard such impudence? Just because you do it on the telly doesn't mean you're available for functions, does it? The nerve of it. In fact, the party in question to celebrate the completion of filming the Magical Mystery Tour is not due to be held until the 21st of December, 5 days before its television transmission on Boxing Day. And of course, we all remember where we were that Boxing Day. Echoing the pantomime nature of Magical Mystery Tour, the party has a fancy dress theme. Paul and Jane Asher come as Pearly King and Queen. Derek Taylor as Adolf Hitler, different times. Alistair Taylor as a matador, Tony Bramwell as a court jester, and Peter Brown as King Louis XIV. While George Martin and his wife Judy come as Prince Philip, makes sense, you can see that, and Queen Elizabeth II. As though to emphasize their differences, John comes as a teddy boy, while Cynthia is a Regency lady in bonnet, crinoline and bows. She immediately feels overdressed, like the lady on the Quality Street tin. The party happens to coincide with one of John's brief reconciliations with his ne'er-do-well father, Fred, who dresses, appropriately enough, as my old man's a dustman. Earlier in the day, Fred had paid a real dustman £5 to swap clothes with him. Pete Shotton can't bear to be in his vicinity.
Because he's fragrant, isn't he?
He literally reeked of garbage. And all the other partygoers did their utmost to keep him at a safe distance. Even allowing for, good expression coming up, even allowing for the bizarre Freemasonry of showbiz, an unexpected guest is the portly comic actor Robert Morley, who arrives as Father Christmas. He was really sweating, observes one guest. Perhaps it was a fault in the hotel's air conditioning, but he looked so uncomfortable. I couldn't believe he was doing it. I felt perhaps his agent had made him. Dinner is followed by a screening of Magical Mystery Tour. John sits at a table with his smelly father, and Fred's young fiancée, Pauline, dressed just as appropriately as a schoolgirl.
Brilliant. The schoolgirls, Regency queens, man wearing actual garbage.
Oh,
All
God.
human life.
At the same table, here we go, are Cilla Black, dressed as the labourer, and her husband Bobby as a nun. This is the 1960s, isn't it?
Cheers.
There is a hiatus between the end of dinner and the beginning of the screening. Come on, John, do a number while we're waiting, suggests Lulu, who's dressed as Shirley Temple in white ankle socks, carrying a giant lollipop, with her hair in ringlets, topped off with a bow. Not bloody likely, replies John. How about you, Fred? This is a mistake. Alistair Taylor, who has organised the party, notes that Fred is pissed out of his head. Consequently, when Fred leaps onto the stage, he falls flat on his face. After the screening, the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band take to the stage and everybody starts to dance. Really interesting point coming up. John has always hated dancing. It's really interesting. But he's enticed onto the floor by the alluring sight of Patty Harrison. Who has come as a belly dancer.
And this causes all sorts of grief, doesn't it, with Cynthia and George? Go on, yeah.
Cynthia is the gooseberry, left sitting primly and stiffly, very much out in the cold. Pete Shotton, dressed like John as a teddy boy, looks on as an unpleasant scene develops. Though Patty had undeniably made herself especially desirable as a scantily clad belly dancer, neither Sin nor George were the least bit amused by John's open flirtation with her. Upset by what is happening, Lulu, still clutching her giant lollipop, gives John a good telling off. At last, Cynthia is asked to dance by Billy J. Kramer, who is dressed by happy coincidence as a Regency soldier. We made a lovely couple, she recalls, until we tried to jive instead of waltz. Catching her foot on her dress, Cynthia falls over, masses of material billowing out like a huge lavender balloon around my crumpled body, she recalls. When John glances over in her direction, Cynthia catches his eye. His looks on that occasion were not of love or admiration, but pure embarrassment. I was letting him down again. So that's
isn't it fantastic?
It's absolutely
seen
fantastic.
From so many different perspectives too.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's wonderful.
It's
so much detail
tragedy.
And the sheer quantity of top celebrity names. Absolutely. It's a blizzard, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's genius.
Yeah, you can have huge fun just reading the index alone.
You could.
There it is. One of our
fantastic
book. 1, 2, 3, 4. The Story of the Beatles by Craig Brown.
Thoroughly recommended.